Hey all, here OS Reviews. Today we're taking a closer look at the Unihertz Luna. This is an Android smartphone from a company that is known for making rather quirky devices, including their Atom series, which are some of the world's smallest Android phones. Some other offerings, including their TikTok line, also has a rear display that can act as a viewfinder for the primary camera for selfies, also show you some quick notifications without waking up the main screen, and they also even make BlackBerry-esque keyboard phones, which are pretty much extinct in this day and age. So the Luna is another device that is pretty unique in the larger landscape of Android devices, although its design is arguably inspired by the Nothing phone, but it's still an interesting trick, and in this case the Luna is going to be more inexpensive, sitting more in the budget category and selling for a little bit north of $250, giving you a taste of this type of design without having to shell out quite as much, but also because the processor is a bit weaker, it's using the MediaTek Helio G99, an octa-core chip which is a 6nm architecture. It's by no means a shabby chip. In fact, we have also seen it used on quite a few tablets recently. Xiaomi's Redmi Pad, Oppo's Realme Pad 2, as well as Lenovo's Tab P11 Gen 2 all use the same Helio G99 processor. Good enough for casual usage comparable to some of the Snapdragon 600 to 700 series chips. And one of the other things that you can see immediately is the Luna does have RGB lights, as compared to the Nothing phone having only pure white color. The camera array consists of a 108 megapixel primary lens, along with a 20 megapixel night vision lens that uses infrared lights, so it's black and white, similar to home security cams, but can see in the dark, and there's also a 2 megapixel macro lens for close-up shots. It's not bad, but I would personally prefer that macro lens to be switched out with a wide-angle lens or a telephoto that I think are both a little bit more practical, but at the very least all three lenses do function, along with a dual-tone LED flash. Now the rear cover here is also made out of glass, and in this case it's transparent. It's not quite the real chip or components, but still looks quite cool, I have to say. Corners of the Luna are completely flat, which is also a little bit reminiscent again of Nothing or maybe even the latest iPhones, and it is a bit of a fingerprint magnet, but it is a metal trim, so it doesn't feel cheap when you're holding it. In fact, the phone definitely has quite a bit of heft at 298 grams, but that's also occupied by a large 5,000 milliamp hour capacity battery, similar to some of their other rugged phones that will be a bit more of an endurance champion. The bottom here also houses the SIM card slot that can also be used to expand the built-in memory. There is 256 gigabytes built on in, which is quite a lot really for a phone in its price range. There's also the USB Type-C charging port, and it can top up this large battery really in just about 2 hours or so at 18 watts. You also find a single speaker and microphone. So this is one area where unfortunately there is no stereo setup on this device, but it is what it is. On the right-hand spine, there's access to a volume rocker and also the power key, which serves double duty as a fingerprint scanner. It's quite fast and works without really any problems. The top here also houses a 3.5mm headphone jack, in addition to an IR blaster. And on the left-hand spine, similar to other Unihertz phones we've seen recently, there are two programmable hotkeys. You're able to long press, double press to trigger commands like using the lights, the flashlight, open up certain apps, which is a pretty useful hardware feature that I do think more smartphones should incorporate. And on the front, we have a 6.8-inch Full HD Plus resolution IPS LCD display. It's actually quite sharp and offers pretty generous viewing angles, as well as even contrast for a LCD screen. It's completely flat as well, so there are no kind of accidental touches. We tend to prefer 90 Hz or above these days, even on less expensive devices, just to give you a slightly more fluid experience when you're scrolling. But honestly, on here, it's really not bad. Even as I'm interacting with the main menu, perhaps it's the Helio G99, which is really keeping up very well, and as a result, I'm not noticing too much slowdowns or delays. The top houses the earpiece and the sliver, along with a 32 megapixel front-facing camera. Now, a few final specs on this device include 8 gigabytes of built-in RAM, which I would say is also sufficient for more of an entry-level / mid-range phone. Connectivity is also relatively well positioned, including built-in NFC. There is Bluetooth 5.3, GPS, Wi-Fi, and 4G LTE, although you won't find access to Qi wireless charging, despite the circular pattern there of the light almost resembling a Qi receiver. Also, this particular unit doesn't have official IP rating for water resistance. That is a contrast with some of their more rugged-oriented phones that are meant to survive rougher terrains. But it does have a included jelly TPU case in the box that adds a little bit of shock absorbency. Other quick packaging contents also include a SIM ejector tool along with an extra screen protector. One is factory pre-applied, as well as the quick user guide, a standard USB Type-A charging brick, and USB Type-C cable. Software-wise, the Unihertz Luna is running on a relatively clean version of Android 12 out of the box. Really, it's only this sci-fi inspired wallpaper along with a custom widget that you can get rid of if wanted to for controlling the LED panels on the rear that are different. Everything else that you see here are pretty much stock to regular Android, including all of the Google apps. You have access to the Play Store as well, and there's very little bloat. You do have access though to a Zara remote control tool, turning this into a universal smart remote for learning the codes from a TV or other appliances. And inside the toolbox, which is retained from their more rugged phones, you get access to some handy utility functions like a compass, a barometer, alarm, even a simple pedometer, and a speedometer can also be found. Perhaps a little bit more useful for rugged phone users, but nonetheless can be found here. And speaking of that custom widget, you're able to quickly turn on and off those LED lights on the rear, including acting as a notification for incoming calls, as well as using it for media. So if you're listening to music from the phone, it will flash and strobe, acting as a charging indicator, and also if you want to change the colors and transitions as well. So some quick settings can be found there. You can also tap on the dots to go into more of an advanced setting, which also allows you to change the brightness of those LED lights. Just going through a kind of quick demo here. So you do get a fair amount of customization that is baked on in. However, if you do have the lights there turned on 24/7, it will definitely drain power more quickly. Even though it has a very energy efficient processor and a large battery cell, if you're constantly using these lights, then you still would have to charge this thing at the end of the day. Plus, having these lights on continuously for longer than, say, 40 minutes does generate a little bit of heat as well on the back of the device. Though in general usage, it remains fairly cool. You can also use it as a soft fill light for the camera as well, as another lighting source in addition to the flash if you're shooting, say, in a slightly darker environment. It is a pretty cool conversation starter and a way to kind of attract a bit of attention if you had a party, for instance. And when a phone call comes in, it will then flash. Starting off here with the camera, it is quite a simple experience, and optimization in terms of computational photography really isn't a strength on smaller phone companies like Unihertz. But at the very least, you have different modes, including HDR as well as resolution that you can toggle into. Even raw images can be captured for further tweaking in Photoshop, for instance, later on. You do get a portrait or bokeh mode here as well. And tucked away under more, you can find a QR code scanner, the IR night vision mode, in which if we dim all the lights here, you can still make out your surroundings. Now, as for video quality, you can capture up to 2K resolution. An example of just daytime shots using that primary lens do tend to look fairly good. Colors are a bit on the saturated side, but we do have plenty of detail here in the tree leaves, although obviously those file sizes will be larger as well. So it's not bad. You do have a little bit of natural bokeh falling off further in the distance as well, and for the most part, colors are, I would say, fairly pleasing for a mid-range phone. So as long as you're not expecting miracles, I think you'll be still mostly fine with this particular camera, although again, in dark situations, it may struggle a bit more. Now moving into a quick demo of video playback and what the speakers sound like next. So some takeaways here being that in general it gets quite loud and doesn't actually sound as tinny as you would expect, although as a single unit it can be muffled up and stereo separation is not going to be present. However, you do have again a regular headphone jack plus a pretty up-to-date version of Bluetooth that you can always use to expand on that if needed. Again, the Helio G99 is a pretty good performer. If you're just doing simple video consumption, it's not going to pose an issue. Even scrolling around the UI all still feels pretty fluid and fast, including split screen multitasking, picture-in-picture. Even the haptics on here are surprisingly not bad. It actually feels quite tight when you are typing along. Other settings are fairly stock again to Android 12. From Unihertz, they really just added in a shortcut settings drawer where you can again reprogram what that first and second function key will correspond to. It generally works really without too many issues, just like on their other rugged phones, or opening up other applications at a click as well. So it is fairly easy to kind of customize. This phone also has virtual RAM for memory expansion, up to 7 gigabytes. So that will take some of the storage or ROM to augment the actual built-in RAM. So in total, you can get upwards of 15 gigabytes of RAM on the device. Granted, it isn't quite the same thing, but it does allow you to still multitask a little bit easier and puts it into a very comfortable territory when it comes to juggling applications that you don't really have to worry about, at least in the RAM department. A menu for hiding certain applications that require a password, plus freezing certain apps that haven't been used in a long time to also free up on some of the space. Under My Device, you can also check out some basic properties and also click on this icon to check if there's any system updates, which are really firmware updates to improve the system's stability, but OS level updates. For example, upgrading it to Android 14 or 15 is probably not going to be present. It's kind of a trend on these lower cost devices, and an area that perhaps has more room for improvement. Otherwise, performance of the Helio G99, we can also tell, poses no issues when we are browsing the web. We can even load up the full desktop version of the site, like The Verge, and despite this being a pretty complex page with lots of videos and ads, it still is doing a pretty good job at quickly loading things back, still feeling quite responsive. In general, I was able to hop back and forth between around 10 tabs in the browser. Reception quality over dual-band Wi-Fi also remains strong, so no issues in that department. Similarly, with 4G LTE on T-Mobile, antennas were good and also picked up my voice without too many issues. As we're doing a bit of gaming, I would say the Helio G99, again, is a decent choice here in the budget range. Don't expect this to rival Snapdragon 8 Gen 1 or 8 Gen 2 chips when it comes to the fastest frame rates all the time. And also, if you are playing more graphically demanding titles like Asphalt or PUBG, you will have to typically lower the graphic settings to low, but things are still playable, and again, ample memory on here ensures that you can install any app from the Play Store without any issues, especially if you're keeping yourself to more lightweight or even moderate titles. Things are still going to load up and play quite quickly. And again, the 6nm architecture of the Helio G99 is very energy efficient. I didn't really encounter any instances of thermal throttling or even the phone getting too warm when it came to gaming, as well as watching videos and day-to-day usage. So that is more or less it as far as our hands-on review of the Unihertz Luna. And I think overall this is a kind of interesting Android smartphone. Although its design on the back may not be the most original thing in the world, it definitely is playful and fun, and an entire landscape of smartphones in general still is different, offering generally smooth performance along with a pretty clean version of the system. You can check out more details if you're interested in the links down below, but for now that's been our video. Thanks for watching here at OS Reviews. That's been the Unihertz Luna.